and welcome back to Berserkersden. On today's video, I will be showing you how I make a cider. Right, so the first thing that you want to do, which I've already done, is get your apples. I'm using roughly around 6 to 8 kilograms of apples. These apples have been gifted to me by a good friend of mine. So I thought, what can I do with them apart from make a nice cider? So what you want to do is wash your apples, make sure there's no dirt or any bug bites in there or anything like that. So just give them a bit of a swirl and then cut them into quarters. With these quarters, what a lot of people do will put them in a bucket and they'll bash them with a big log or a big stick, something like that, just to mush them up a bit. I don't have one of those, so what I'm going to use is my blender. If you're going to do this, I suggest that you try not to blend it too much so it becomes more of a puree. You just want to break them up a bit. You just want to chuck them in. Little bits at a time. Obviously you're going to need to do this a few times. So you just want to put your crushed apples into a separate container. All this is just preparation for when we put it into the press later on. Okay, so I've just filled my first bowl. I've still got a lot more to do. So I'm ready now to start with the press. But before I do this, I want to get my fermentation vessel ready. So after I've collected a full jug of juice, I can just pour it straight in. As you can see, we've already got a bit of juice starting to pull through now. In this package, you get some crushed shapes. You just pop them on first. Then you get 4 blocks, just stack on the top. Whoops. Try not to lose any. You then have this plate with a metal plate on it. Which just slides down like so. Silicone washer, just to pop on there. Oops. And a turner. So all you want to do get that to there. And you turn, and as you turn, you press the fruit. Look how easy that goes down.
Two hours later.
Okay, so here's all the apple juice that I was able to collect. I do have a couple more apples, but I don't quite think they're going to fill it. While I continue, I'm going to leave the press in situ and allow what's left in there to try and drain. Luckily, I didn't think that we were going to have enough to fill this. So I've gone out, I bought myself some apple juice, just the standard one that I use in other videos. I'm going to use it just to fill about the next half. So what I'm going to do now, before I fill it to the top, I'm going to get some of this apple juice and bring it to a slow boil. Nothing too heavy, just a light boil. And I'm going to add 1 kilogram of brown sugar. I'm going to do this just to add a lot more sweetness in it. It'll also raise the hydrometer. We'll have a lot more gravity reading. Although I'm not aiming for this to be a high percentage drink, I'm only wanting roughly around 6 to 7% alcohol, but I'm hoping a lot of the sweetness will be left and have a lovely sweet apple cider. Okay, so in here is 750 ml of apple juice and 1 kilogram of brown sugar. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to take some of this. It's quite thick and syrupy. So I do have some left. Probably should have done half. About 750 grams of sugar. No problem. So what I'm going to do with this now is I'm going to let this cool down, because it's still reading roughly around 35 degrees Celsius. I need this down to at least 20. It's not too warm to touch, but for an accurate hydrometer reading and for the yeast to survive, it needs to come down to more of a room temperature. So now we're going to take our hydrometer reading. This will be to work out what the gravity is, so that we can work out what our alcohol is. I'm quite surprised that is landing on 1.103. Okay, so it has the potential, if I wanted to let it go dry, to go to about 13.5%, which is very doable with the yeast that I'm using today, Lalvin 71B. as the tolerance for this is around 14 to 15%. So I'll have to keep an eye on this one to make sure it doesn't turn into a very, very strong cider. What we generally do with our yeast is we like to rehydrate it. This sort of just brings it back into life. However, with this one I'm going to do a bit of an experiment. I'm just going to pour half a packet straight in and mix it up and see how we get on with that. I'm only using half a packet because it's only a 1 gallon batch. If I was going to do 2 or 5 gallons, then I'd use a full packet. But for what we need, half a pack should do. Because remember, yeast like to colonize and grow. So there'll be a lot more than just what we've put in there towards the end. Which would mean, if we use the whole pack, we could get quite a bit of a build up at the bottom, which we don't want. Now I'm just going to put the bung on. I'm just going to swirl this in. Okay, so you can't see them all floating around in there. Usually when we've rehydrated it, it's all mixed in with some water. But I don't really want to add any more water to that because we're looking quite high with the fluid content. That's tight. I think it will probably take a while to start fermenting, which is sort of what I want for this one. I want a slow ferment rather than a fast ferment, so that we're not getting, so we're holding all that appley flavour as well as the toffee, I suppose, from the sugar. If it fermented too quickly, that's when you get the stuff that just tastes like jet fuel. A nice gentle fermentation is what we need. And we are back about 2.5 to 3 weeks later. As you can see, we are still getting quite a bit of activity going on in here. The bubbles are just going insane. It is not stopping. I've been checking up on the gravity readings. Last I checked, it was around about 6%, and that was about half a week ago. So I'm hoping now we will come to a nice point where I'll be happy enough to stop this. So the way we do this is obviously we're going to take our hydrometer reading and all that jazz, but we need to add the chemicals that we need to use, such as fermentation stopper, Camden tablets. But before we do that, we will take a new hydrometer reading to find out what our final ABV is. What are we looking at now? Obviously the bubbles that are in here don't help that much. Two, 6. Okay, so our final gravity reading is going to be 1.046. Let's do the maths. Okay, so the alcohol by volume, our new gravity reading that I'm getting, if I stop this now, is 7.48%. Obviously it'll take a little bit of time for the chemicals to start kicking in, so I'm going to call that probably about 7.5%. I think 7.5% is a good place to stop this apple cider. It's not a mead, it's not designed to be like a wine or anything with a high ABV, anything from about 10% onwards. So I'm quite happy calling this 7.5%. So what we do now is I'm going to rack this into my secondary glass vessel along with those chemicals I listed earlier to stop the fermentation process, as well as to preserve our cider. Being as it's relatively a low alcohol, as in it's not above 14%, it is still vulnerable to turning into vinegar really. To start, I am going to add 1 teaspoon of fermentation stopper. Swirl that around in some of the water that I've got left in there. Just let that dissolve in. I'm also adding 1 Camden tablet per gallon, which is roughly what we've got here. And then once that's all crushed, in that goes. I am going to add pectolase. Pectolase is a chemical you will use when using fruit and berries and anything like that which can cause a haze in your drink. This just collects all the proteins floating around and it will drag it down to the bottom, leaving you with a clearer drink. I'm not too fussed about this being crystal clear, but I would like to clear it up a little bit. Now this will happen over time as well, but I don't want to keep hanging on to this for a long time like I do with most meads, because they age better. This is something I want to make and drink fairly quickly after being boiled. So we're just going to add 1 heap like that, and that is sweet. It has retained the sweetness like I wanted to, so that's good. The alcohol in it doesn't taste very heavy either. I think that'll be quite pleasant to drink. Okay, so to transfer this now, we are going to use my auto siphon. You'll be able to see all this bed of sediment down the bottom here. It sort of looks a bit like mud or sand. That's what we want to leave behind. Fortunately, this hasn't been filled all to the top, so we're not going to get a huge amount left. We're taking into account for the sediment at the bottom. Couple of pumps like that and you will see it flow through. So as you may see, it's sort of, what I did was I put it in and I dropped the tube down and around so it actually ends here. And I've done it like this so we're not dropping the cider in there. It's got a nice flow and it'll just trickle out the end. This helps stop the oxygen interfering again. Okay, so that was all I was able to get from our primary. These bits floating around are just parts of the chemicals that we put in earlier. As you can see, I was able to leave behind the residue, but unfortunately I had to leave some of the actual cider behind as well. It is totally drinkable, it can be drunk, but it's not very pleasant. It's not going to harm you, but it just doesn't taste very nice. So I'm just going to pop a airlock back on there, just to stop any nasties getting into our cider. And then this is where it will sit, and it will stay for probably only a few days to a week, just so that it clears out a bit. It is still bubbling, it is still making gases, which actually works in our favour. Even though that we've put the fermentation stopper in it, it will stop the fermentation, but it will take a little while to do so. As I was saying, this works in our favour because now this is creating gas. This gas is going to fill this void here, and obviously it'll push through there, but once it gets to a weak enough balance, it'll get trapped from the water, it'll keep itself trapped in here, and it'll keep the gas in this void, keeping our cider nice and healthy. So there's no oxygen being, this void will not be oxygen filled, so it's not going to be resting on oxygen, it'll be resting on CO2, I believe it creates, keeping it fresh. And that is it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining me today on me showing you how I made my apple cider using fresh apples and apple juice bought from the store. If you've enjoyed this content, please subscribe to the channel, share with your friends, leave it a like and comment something nice down below. It helps the channel and it helps the algorithm pushing my videos forward so I can bring you more content such as this. Please check out my other videos. There will be a playlist here and another video here. If you would like to subscribe, there is the button just down below me here. Thank you very much, everybody. Until next time, cheers.